3 Disturbing True Blackout Horror Stories, Volume 2 by Mr. Nightmare. We are on the left side to make sure we are preserving his watermark.
It was a chilly night in early March. This happened a couple years ago now. I had just gotten home from work. I was working late that night, so it was close to midnight by the time I walked through the door. I was beyond exhausted. I wanted nothing more than to crack open a freezing cold beer and throw my feet up on the couch. So that's exactly what I did. Alcohol always tastes better after a hard day's work. I didn't even turn on the TV immediately. I just sat there on the couch with my eyes closed and my feet elevated, trying to ignore the nagging thoughts about how stressful my life was. I remember getting frustrated while flipping through the channels because nothing was catching my eye. After sifting through for another few minutes, I ultimately gave up and opted to enjoy my beer in silence. Like everything else in my life, peace and quiet was apparently too much to ask for, because not 10 seconds later, all the lights in my house simultaneously shut off. You know that slightly fuzzy popping sound that comes a split second before everything shuts off? Yeah, there's nothing I hate more than hearing that noise.
The buzz, yeah.
For whatever reason, our house had a tendency to lose power every so often. Now that I think about it, it still does. Anyway, my first reaction was to step outside and see if any of the neighboring houses were affected. I stepped outside and shut the door behind me, trying to preserve any heat that I might not be able to get back should I fail to restore the power. It was
Smart.
late, but I remember seeing at least one house on my block with their lights on, which confirmed that my house was the problem.
Interesting.
I closed my eyes and took a deep breath, knowing that this headache would definitely spoil whatever pleasure I was hoping to salvage from the night.
That's actually super interesting. I don't know. That's one of those things, like, we've had power outages, right? I don't think we've had blackouts since I've been here in Idaho. Like I'm like in my area specifically. Maybe someone's hit a power pole once or twice, but like an actual like blackout, I don't think I've experienced in a hot minute. I think when I used to live in California and SoCal, I think we experienced a few of those. That's actually really interesting to think about how I deal with a situation like that. I guess make sure every door is locked and stuff, right? Make sure doors are locked, make sure property's secure. Just wait for power to come back on, ultimately find something else to do. Obviously, in a situation like this, it's really irritating and aggravating when you're just coming off of a really long shift, right? But it's one of those things where you just make sure to take stock of your surroundings and do what you can to keep yourself busy and entertained until the power comes back on. Or if the power doesn't come back on, that's when you get your phone. You start saying, looking up if like what the outage is. If there's a reported issue on the outage, calling the power company if they're open, right? Then you start getting into things.
I turned back to go inside, but when I turned the handle on the front door, it wouldn't budge.
Interesting.
I froze, confused at first. I tried the handle a few more times, but it was definitely locked. What the hell was going on? I banged on the door and called my wife's name, thinking maybe she had woken up without me realizing. There was no answer. I tried to peer through the glass, but it was still pitch black in there. I ran around to the back. That door was locked too. I started panicking. My wife had a tendency to leave doors unlocked, so it was weird that the back door would be locked in the first place. I ran around to the side of the house to check the breaker, and I froze in my tracks. My hose, which I knew for a fact had been coiled, was laying in the grass just below the breaker box. The realization hit me like a freight train. Someone had cut the power intentionally. Without thinking, I sprinted to the nearest window and desperately looked inside one more time. This time, I was able to make out 2 flashlights swinging around wildly in the dark, as if 2 people were rummaging through my house. They were. I knew.
I mean, that's honestly that was architected very well. I hate giving them points on that, but yeah, cutting the power, going outside and locking, that's a very safe way to do that. Okay. How do you defend yourself against that? Once again, reasonably make sure all your doors are locked. Make sure that you're being safe. Make sure that you're keeping yourself busy and preoccupied, and make sure that you're just aware, right? And that's a hard one, right? That's a hard one because that there's logic and reason to this.
They were stealing shit. I was infuriated. The nerve of someone to do this while I was literally home. I reached into my pocket to call the police, only to realize that I had left my phone on the couch.
Oh, rip.
After cursing under my breath, I told myself I'd just run to the neighbor's house and borrow his phone. As I started making my way to the nearest house, another, more sinister thought hit me. My wife was still inside. She was probably asleep, vulnerable to whoever was in the house. I couldn't leave her there, even for another minute. I sprinted back to my house and frantically grabbed some loose rocks from the yard.
You got to get the police called, though. Just hurry over, get your neighbor's attention. Hey, this is the situation. I need to get back here. Because, just from a number standpoint, a 2v1, even not inebriated in any capacity, right? Because he's had a beer. That's not... that. The moment you start adding more combatants to a situation, once again, do SCA and stuff, right? When you start adding more fighters, more people to the equation, it doesn't just get multiplicatively harder. It gets exponentially harder. Flanking is a thing, much as early D&D 5e tried to tell you it wasn't, right? We home ruled that back in because I was dumb. But like, I think that the drive is there, but I think ultimately it forgoes a lifeline, and that is going to be a problem.
I started chucking them at our bedroom window, hoping to wake her up. After the third rock, she opened the window. Before she had a chance to say anything, I quietly told her what was happening and instructed her to hide in our closet. Her head disappeared immediately.
Bro, yes, the loud-ass rocks that just hit the window. Be quiet. Once again, I like the man's thought process. I like where he's at, right? I like what his end goal is. How he gets there is not necessarily the smartest.
She didn't ask questions. I then sprinted to my neighbor's house and banged on the door. I explained what was going on as quickly as possible, and then I used his phone to call the police.
Okay, he did it out of order.
I waited on his porch, praying that my wife would be okay. The police eventually arrived, and I ran out to one of the cars, explaining the situation as best I could. They barged into the house, but by then, it was too late. The back door was wide open, and whoever had broken in was gone, with too many of our valuables to count. My wife was more shaken than I was, and understandably so. What she told me and the police made me angry at myself for not doing a better job at protecting her. To this day, I'll never forgive myself for leaving her in the house with potential murderers. Apparently, mere seconds after I instructed her to hide, she heard someone kick the bedroom door open. The person walked into the room and cocked a gun. He stood there motionlessly for a few seconds.
And this is why the rocks were a problem.
Clearly listening for anyone in the room. She said she had never been more terrified in her entire life. I believe the intruders heard me throwing the rocks at the window. The scariest part is that we still live in this house, and we're not planning on moving out anytime soon. Sometimes I think about what could have happened had I not stepped outside for those brief moments.
Yeah, that's a hard one. I mean, I can tell you that I habitually lock my doors, right? I've known people who don't lock their doors, right? Or overnight, right? And sure, it's in a good, it's in a good neighborhood, right? They just leave their back door open, and I just sit there and I'm just like, why? What is the reasoning here? Like, why are we not locking doors, right? And it's one of those things, like, people are going to people, right? When I am in control of a situation, right? Like, let's say I'm home alone, right? Every door is locked. Okay, every door is locked. I'm gonna do my own thing. And the moment I hear a peep, it's gonna be one of those things where it's like, okay, what's threat assessment mode? Is this just wood creaking? Is this just something? What is this, right? I think I'm glad that everyone did get out of the situation okay, right? Like that is what's important here. It sucks that, yeah, they lost a lot of valuables from that. It absolutely does. It pays to lock your door. Take that as value out of this. Yeah, the rocks were a little bit of a faux pas, though. But I understand the urgency, because what happens, and this is the hypothetical, what happens if they're upstairs to begin with, right? You just don't know. You just don't know. And especially without any way to communicate that, right? That's a hard one. Like, depending what they say would cut the breaker, is it that they cut the wire specifically or just shut it off? I don't know how easy it'd be to restore power in that situation. I don't know if it's easy as flipping a couple switches. I don't know. I don't know enough about how that works. Getting people on board, getting the police on the way, I feel would be a surefire way, because at minimum, right, if they're in a confined situation inside of a house and they see police sirens, they're not exactly likely to go upstairs, or if they are upstairs, they're going to rush down, or trying to go upstairs, they're going to rush downstairs, right? I think that his heart was in the right place. I think that that is wild timing that she was able to get in the closet, but I do think that that actually did put her in a lot of danger. And it's very easy to criticize. At the end of the day, the important thing to understand is we're here criticizing this from an outside perspective. We're not in the situation actively, and everyone did get out okay, and that's the important part to remember.
I've always lived in the shadow of my older brother. I'm not bitter about it, but it's just been the truth. He's got a successful business, and I've been trying to replicate that for the better part of 6 years now. I recently moved back in with my parents to try and find some footing. Going back home definitely felt like a step backward, but I didn't have many options. I was staying in the basement to keep out of their way as much as I could. It wasn't too bad down there. It was almost like a mini apartment. The basement had its own little kitchen, bathroom, office, bedroom, and even a TV with my old video games. With all that, I rarely went upstairs. I could pretty much live down there on my own, and it kept me from feeling like a total burden.
I feel like a living situation like this would be baller, right? Just live with some buddies in a situation like this, have effectively 2 different living spaces. I could see this being really cool.
One night, it was either Friday or Saturday, there was a pretty nasty storm blustering outside. Rain was hammering against the windows, and the wind was strong enough to rattle the whole house. I can't overstate the intensity of it. It was one of the wildest storms I had ever seen at that point. My parents were out of town for the weekend, so I had the place to myself, which was fine by me. I remember it being extra cozy down there that night. I love listening to a raging storm from the comfort of a warm bed, especially when it's late at night. There's something about hunkering down inside during a chaotic storm that really eases my mind. I was about to fall asleep to the soothing pattering of rain when the power suddenly went out. Everything clicked off at once, and I was left in total darkness. I groaned, annoyed at the inconvenience. I figured the storm must have knocked out the power, and for a second I thought about going to check the breaker, but I didn't feel like dealing with it. Not with the storm raging outside. Besides, I was about to go to bed anyway, and I didn't really know where the breaker was to begin with. I figured I'd just wait it out and deal with it in the morning. As I lay there, trying to get comfortable again, I heard something. A loud, unnatural thud against one of the basement windows. It sounded heavy, like something had hit it hard. My first thought was that maybe a branch had come loose in the wind, or a tree
You reasonably assume that it's just something from the storm.
had fallen. But the sound was sharp and deliberate, not like anything I'd heard before. As lazy as I wanted to be, I couldn't ignore a fallen tree. That was a bit of a step up from a simple power outage. Reluctantly, I got out of bed and grabbed my phone, using the flashlight to make my way over to the window. The basement was pitch black, and the only sounds were the rain pelting the glass and the low rumble of the thunder outside.
So on this subject, actually, I'm a huge fan of, the giant flashlights that are, they have the really long handle, and you turn them on, and it's like the power of the sun just beaming out at it. What does anyone know what those flashlights are? Anyone know, have a good brand of flashlight that you just turn it on and it blinds everything in front of you? Like the really powerful long-handled flashlights that you can also use as a club. if you have one, please leave a recommendation down below. I've been itching on getting one of those just because it's funny, right? Rather than phone camera. Let me use the portable power of the sun to look for something.
I remember rubbing fuzzies out of my eyes to try and wake myself up a little bit. I held my phone up to the window, squinting through the glass, and nearly died from my heart stopping right there. There was a man's face pressed up against the window, and he was staring in at me.
Come on, dude.
His eyes were wide, his skin pale and drenched, and for a split second, he made direct eye contact with me. As soon as he saw me looking, he moved away from the window. I stumbled back, almost dropping my phone in shock. What the f had I just seen? I felt my heart starting to race. I could barely breathe, but I didn't have much time to process it because a few seconds later, I started hearing another sound, the sound of footsteps. I listened closely. The floorboards above my head were creaking gently. There were people in the house. Between what I had just seen and
Man in basement was bait.
what I was hearing, I was on the verge of losing it. I was home alone and my house was literally getting broken into. On top of everything, one of them knew I was in the basement.
Yep.
I couldn't think clearly with how severe the situation was. Everything was happening so fast, but I had no choice but to act.
So how do you address potential concerns like this, right? So obviously, right, if you're in your home, you're not necessarily carrying, say, your 9mm on your hip constantly, right? You're not carrying a 9-iron. You're not carrying a K-bar on you constantly, right? Or a machete, right? How do you reasonably investigate things like this, right? Is it one of those that you just if you're investigating something, you normalize carrying some form of protection, right? And let the people you know with, especially if there are people you're living with at home. I feel if there's other people at home, right, reasonably you're not going to do it, right? Because safety in numbers logic, right? But if you're home alone and have to investigate something like a fallen branch, would it actually at that point pay to equip yourself with something? To have a 9-iron or a kitchen knife or something? Like what becomes the logical progression there? Because society would dictate, at least normal quote unquote behavior would dictate, no, just go investigate it, right? Like why are you walking around you're blacked out apart with a knife, 5 head? Come on now, don't be weird, right? But like, it's more than that. And even if you got to the basement, because I mean, this is clearly, to me, this reads as bait. The wide-eyed person pressed against the basement window was there to lure the person from upstairs to downstairs. They saw them, they know exactly where they're at, and any change in steps, movement, etc. from downstairs would dictate, they know where you are at that point. They have you pinned. And, I mean, would having the baseball bat at that point help? Hard to say. You don't know if the intruders are armed or not. I think that there's some common sense threads you could string together in situations like this. I think that depending on certain factors, especially if you're home alone, maybe bringing a baseball bat with you, maybe that just helps. Maybe that's one of those things that just, if anything, it's a deterrent. Carry a big stick, right? That sort of logic. Carry big stick, speak softly, that kind of thing. It's hard to say. I think it's also super subjective, though. I think it depends on the situation.
I quickly checked my phone, ready to call the police. But then I remembered that power outage had knocked out the Wi-Fi, and with no cell service in the basement, I was trapped down there, totally cut off. I knew I couldn't just sit around and wait for these people to do whatever they'd come to do. I tried to calm myself, thinking through my options. I couldn't let those strangers just roam around my house, but I definitely didn't want to confront them head on. I was literally stuck in a lose-lose situation. I decided I'd try to sneak upstairs, skip out the front door quietly, and then call the police once I was outside. I didn't have another choice. Keeping my footsteps as quiet as possible, I made my way up to the basement stairs. I still remember the pure fear of that moment. You never know how your body's going to react to something traumatic until it happens.
Yep, correct.
When I reached the top, I peered around the stairwell. My heart sank because I saw 3 figures with flashlights moving around my pitch black house. I watched them for a few seconds, literally petrified. One of their flashlights panned across their body just long enough for me to make out what one of them was carrying. It was a gun. I froze. Every muscle in my body was tense. I didn't move. I just watched as they murmured to each other in low voices. That's when I heard one of them say something that escalated the situation even further, if that was even possible. In a calm, almost casual voice, one of them said, "Alex is in the basement, go find him." I can't describe the terror I was feeling. How the fuck did he know my name? I backed down the stairs as quietly as I could, trying to keep my breathing steady, but inside, I was losing my shit entirely.
I feel that the correct decision here would have been to remain in the basement and barricade yourself in and make yourself small as possible, right? Whether that's a closet or something. It's hard to say, right? But you want to make sure that you're playing avoidance at that point, right? If you really wanted to go the extra mile and you're not worried about property damage, clearly there's a window, right? If you can break the window, break the window. But you would have to make sure you're doing it in a safe capacity, right? Where it's throwing the stone to mislead the people searching for you, right? Lord of the Rings status, right? What is it? Pippin throws the mushrooms, right? In the films, he throws the mushrooms and the Nazgul chases after the mushroom bag, right? That kind of thing. You're trying to misdirect. But at the same time, if they think that you're getting out, that runs into a problem because now they know you're trying to get out and thus they know their window of opportunity is closing. So I think at its core, the most logical decision would not have been to go upstairs because you don't know, right? You don't know if they're armed. Clearly in the situation, it plays out that they were armed, right? You make yourself as small as possible. This even goes back to self-defense videos. Let's say, I don't know, you have your trusty home defense shotgun, right? Rather than breaching clear through your entire home sweeping, would it not pay to bunker down and, have a full, 720-degree view in front of you in case someone comes down the stairs, right? But that's also that's not an understanding that you actually are armed with an implement like that, right? I'm curious to see how he gets out of it, because this is definitely a pretty rough situation. You are backed into the corner in the basement, and it's really impressive that he's able to remain as quiet as he is.
I knew I didn't have much time. They were coming for me, and I had no idea what was going to happen once they found me.
Mm-hmm.
I looked around frantically, considering potential hiding spots. There wasn't time. I needed to get the hell out of there in the next minute, or I was going to die. The only possible way out was through one of the basement windows, but they were all sealed from the inside.
Mm-hmm.
I had no other choice. I grabbed a nearby stool, climbed up one of the window wells, and smashed the glass with my elbow.
Mm-hmm.
Shards of glass flew everywhere, but I didn't care. I scrambled through the broken window, pulling myself out into the rain. I felt the cuts all over my body, but I didn't have time to register the pain with the adrenaline and fear coursing through my veins. The downpour soaked me instantly, and I ran through the mud, trying not to slip. Once I was a safe distance from the house, I finally got a signal and called the police. I remember my hands shaking so hard I could barely hold the phone. By the time the police searched the house, whoever had been in there was long gone. So much stuff had been stolen. I'm not even going to bother listing everything that was taken.
Yikes.
The power outage had been intentional, no surprise there. My parents were livid and threatened to kick me out of the house. I basically had to beg them not.
For what reason, though? It sucks, don't get me wrong, right? But what's the expectation there? You go boop, boop, beep, boop, open the gun safe and grab the Mossberg? What's the expectation there? Don't get me wrong. It's one of those, I'd be pissed as a parent there. I think any of us would be pissed as a parent there. What is the alternative, though, right? It's unless we're operating under the assumption that it's rules for thee, but not for me, right? How would the parents have operated in the same capacity? Would the parents have gotten out of that with that genius thinking, right? Being able to just crawl out of the basement, which you, for all intents and purposes, have been trapped into, right? You don't even know if the dude's out there just out behind the corner, right? I don't know. I can see both sides of it. I can see the stress and the frustration side of things, but I can also see realistically, what would you want me to do? What would you want, right? Reasonably, this escalated far beyond what it was, right? This escalated. This went to a 10 very quickly, 0 to 60 instantly. I don't know. That's an interesting one. I'd have to have parents chime in on, because I don't know. I don't know what the reasonable middle ground there is. I don't know what the compromise is.
Insisting that there was nothing else I could have done. They eventually calmed down, but I'm still pretty shaken by the whole ordeal.
Right.
I still have no idea who those people were or how they knew my name. I hate thinking about what might have happened had they found me.
I mean, thankfully the glass wasn't, modern safety glass, right? Thankfully this was glass. Thankfully, quote unquote, right? Subjective, that you're able to get out of the situation like that. If it was safety glass, which is on most subdivision windows and stuff, I don't know if that would have worked. I actually don't know how much pressure is supposed to be applied to those things and what ways to break those. I do know that I guess you can order What was it? What did we see on TikTok a while back? I think it was a Daily Dose of Internet video. We actually saw it on. And there's this little like pokey thing that you can like, you suction cup it to the window and you push it forward and it cracks the window open. I guess it's like an actual tool made to break glass. Sure, I guess you could have those, right? But like, would people view that as weird? Would people view that as like, why do you have this? Even then, in a situation like this, are you going to just carry it on your? I guess you could carry it on your keychain, right? I guess that would make sense. But if you get stopped by law enforcement and they see it, that might bring more questions than answers, right? How do you defend? Oh, I'll watch the Mr. Nightmare video on YouTube, and in case I need to use it. Really, let's talk about that first, right? It's reasonable expectation, right? I could say, well, I'm going to go walk down to a convenience store at 4 a.m. I'm going to, have a sword at my hip. Cop's going to look at me and go, Kip, what are you doing, my guy? Come on now. It's Idaho. Come on. And even then, the expectation for a lot of people, they just built their 38 special revolver at their hip, and that's more socially acceptable than having a sword at your hip, right? Like, social expectations and social norms do come into play with situations like this. And it could also be a non-issue depending on the situation. It just depends, right? It depends what you're willing to open yourself up to. It depends how paranoid, and I don't use that in a derogatory mean. It depends how paranoid you want to be. It depends what you're trying to prepare for. And reasonably, you can only be so prepared.
I live in a quiet suburban area, but there are a lot of more densely populated towns within driving distance of me. A few months ago, I picked up a night shift security job at a warehouse a few towns over.
Sure.
It was situated in this industrial space that stretched on for miles. The building itself was isolated with rows and rows of tall metal shelves and a couple of big loading docks. The work was easy, routine checks, basic security, making sure everything stayed locked up. It was quiet, usually too quiet, but I didn't mind. I liked the solitude, and most nights I could finish my shift without much happening. It was a Thursday night and it was pouring out. I was checking my phone every so often for updates on the storm, as I wasn't too keen on having to drive home in those conditions.
Right.
Luckily, there wasn't much for me to do that night, so I at least had that going for me. The power in the warehouse flickered a few times, but held steady, so I wasn't too worried. But about an hour in, the power finally gave out, plunging the whole warehouse into pitch black darkness. I was pissed. I was the only employee there that night, so the responsibility for restoring the power was mine. I had obviously been prepped for a situation like this, but I never thought I'd ever have to actually deal with it. I stepped out of my little security room to begin the process. They had instructed me to unplug some of the massive machines before checking the breakers, so that's what I went to do.
I'm assuming this is to prevent a power surge. I mean, there's a lot of people who watch who work security, right? There's a lot of people who've watched my content. They work security and have a lot of insights into things like this. I think security is just one of those jobs where like it has its easy moments, but I feel like things go 0 to 60 really quick.
My flashlight was the only source of light in the whole place. It was honestly creepy as hell. The silence felt thicker in the dark, and every creak of the building seemed louder without the hum of the lights.
Right.
My footsteps echoed like 100 times louder too, which was definitely an odd feeling. As I was patrolling one of the aisles, I heard a loud, metallic clattering echoing from somewhere deeper in the warehouse. It startled me, but I brushed it off as the storm rattling the roof or the metal shutters. Still, I decided to check it out, aisle by aisle. When I rounded one corner, I froze. A faint beam of light was moving along the shelves up ahead. It looked just like my own flashlight. It clicked off as quickly as I had seen it, but I had definitely seen it. No one should have been there until the morning, though. I felt my heart start to race. Why the hell would someone else be in here? I debated calling out, but ultimately decided against it. When I reached the spot where I'd seen the light, it was gone. The aisle was empty, just rows of crates and shelves stacked high with inventory. I started freaking out, knowing I wasn't going crazy. I knew what I saw. I had a job to do, though. I debated calling the police, but wasn't sure if what I had seen would be enough. I guessed there was a slight chance I could have imagined it. In hindsight, had the company not equipped me with a taser, I probably would have just called the police right there.
Right.
As I continued my patrol, a strange smell hit me. A musty, metallic odor, like rusted metal or stagnant water. The smell was coming from one of the loading bays, a darker part of the warehouse where crates were stacked up floor to ceiling. I followed the smell with my flashlight, and that's when I noticed something odd. My beam reflected off the polished concrete floor, revealing 2 sets of wet footprints leading into one of the storage aisles. In that moment, I wanted to run in the opposite direction and call the police, but I couldn't just yet.
I don't know. I think that depends on policy, right? I mean, I feel like if you were to call the police without merit, that might reflect negatively on your employment. I don't know. I don't know. I haven't worked security. I'd have to really get insights into this, right? Like, I understand there would be concerns, reservations, and even hesitation into calling the cops and something like this. At what point is it reasonable to, especially if you are alone in a warehouse, what point is it reasonable to call them? I think that is a good avenue of questioning to really think of first, right? I mean, in a non-security role, if I saw that, bro, cops would be called so quick. But that's the thing, is that I would not be in a security position. I would not be in a law enforcement position either, right? I don't have military training to really go after things like that. So what becomes the reasonable expectation, and that is subjective to each position, right? I almost wonder if, in situations like this, I almost wonder if hiring military or law enforcement might be a way of paying the least amount of money for the most amount of expectations to people of, well, you have military experience or you have law enforcement experience. We're going to just stick you on night shift alone. We're going to pay you the same as everyone else, but we're going to stick you on night shift alone, and you must deal with everything. Oh, but Greg doesn't have any sort of experience in the military or law enforcement, so we're going to give Greg a little bit of a buddy on shift, right? I wonder if practices like that happen, and if they do, they probably do, let's be honest, because people trying to cut corners save money. That would make sense, and I think that's rather unfortunate to subject people to. Treat people equally across the board, right? Make it fair.
If anyone was poking around, it was on me. That was literally my job. Curiosity got the better of me, and I decided to follow the trail. I kept my flashlight low, not wanting to make it obvious where I was. As I got closer, I started hearing faint whispers, just barely audible, like 2 people having a conversation a few aisles away. I couldn't make out the words, but something about the tone sounded tense, almost urgent. I clicked off my flashlight and held my breath, trying not to make any noise. I gripped my taser and crept closer to the whispering. As I turned the corner, I raised my flashlight to confront whoever was there, but there was honest to God no one in front of me. The whispering had also stopped, which was pure insanity. They had literally been right in front of me. How the hell had they disappeared so quickly? The whole situation had me rattled. I decided that I wasn't getting paid enough for this, right. So I decided to just make a beeline for the circuit room and get the power on without worrying about my other tasks. I made it there and started fumbling around with the breakers in the dark.
I wonder if this is probably the best actual outcome, though, because yes, while you're supposed to be there to secure the premises, deter people, right, investigate things like this, it's kind of hard if they're playing a dance around with you in the warehouse. So turning on the power feels like that could be the smart play, especially if they get to the overlight ahead. Therefore, you're able to see your surroundings, restore vision. That way, you're not, you're not swiping around in the dark at stuff, right? You're not fighting ghosts. You're seeing actual human beings wherever they're trying to hide.
As I was doing that, I heard something scrape across the floor nearby.
Yeah, it's a pipe.
I swung my flashlight around and spotted the edge of a metal tool lying just a few feet away. A crowbar. It hadn't been there before. This was serious now. Whoever was in there with me had potentially malicious intentions.
You have to assume malicious.
I yelled out that I was armed, which was kind of a half bluff considering the taser. I needed to get out of there as fast as possible. My nerves were shot at that point, but I knew my life was more valuable than whatever consequences I'd face for leaving.
Right.
As I was heading for the door, a loud, metallic crash echoed from the far end of the building, followed by the unmistakable sound of rushing footsteps. I felt a surge of adrenaline and started running toward the noise. I turned the corner, and there they were. Standing in the middle of the aisle were two figures dressed all in black. One of them was holding a crowbar identical to the one I had just walked past. They looked at me for a split second, and then, without warning, started sprinting directly towards me. I didn't think, I just turned and ran. All the confidence I had just mustered up was gone. I could hear their footsteps pounding behind me, but I didn't dare look back. I weaved through the aisles, praying that I'd be able to navigate this place better than they could. After what felt like an eternity, the footsteps faded. I paused, catching my breath, and realized they weren't chasing me anymore. Eventually, I made my way toward the exit door and stepped outside. I immediately called the police and begged them to come as quickly as possible. They actually arrived pretty quickly, which I was thankful for. Of course, those two strangers were long gone by then, but the officers were really helpful and even helped me get my power back up. My boss was not as sympathetic, though. He gave me shit for running, and I almost lost my job over the whole incident.
Bro, what is the expectation here? What do you want, right? A taser, as far as I'm aware, is only going to be single use, right? You fire, you miss, you're done, right? What do? Have the man pack a 9 at that point and 45 ACP in case they're a lich? Like what is the expectation here, right? Like, I get that you're hiring someone for security, and if there's I get it, I get being mad, but it's like, hey, John, I know you're okay. Like, I'm glad you're okay. Okay, let's work through this. We want to make sure this doesn't happen again. How can we make this better? And get that feedback. Okay, what do you think would have helped in that situation? Oh, okay. Being able to carry, sure. I mean, let me see if company policy allows that. Let's see what we can do, or let's see if we can get you something a little better, right? Work with your employees rather than just, Lamau, you didn't do it. How could you, Fivehead? Glad you're not fired. Back in my day, something back uphill both ways, right? Like, what is the expectation here? That's awful, dude.
I still can't get over how strange the whole encounter was. Like, it was clear that those people were messing with me, but they still chased me with a weapon. The worst part is I still work nights in that warehouse, although my boss did start putting at least 2 people on the shift every night.
Good.
I still don't know what to make of the whole thing. I'm just glad those guys didn't catch up to me.
One person is just a liability. I think that I almost view it as bait. Being able to see the individuals, them having you in your sight lines, they're kind of applying some sort of 21-foot rule, right? We are close enough to this individual that we will overtake him and deal with the individual because now we know where he is. Sure, I guess reasonably while he was doing the circuit breaker, right? While he was dealing with the power, I guess they could have beat him over the head with a crowbar or lead pipe. Sure, that is a thing that does come to mind. But at the end of the day, this is definitely one of those that, like, it's a hard one because this stuff happens, right? Ideally, yeah, just have 2 people on shift, be able to check each other, right? Be able to to work with each other to resolve a situation like that. And at the very least, in a situation like that, it becomes a 2v2 rather than a 2v1 with a single taser, which is going to be fire, forget, hit, did you hit, yes, no, right? Hopefully employment got better after that. Seems like it got better with 2 people on shift. It sucks to work in that same warehouse, especially because that is a traumatic incident for all intents and purposes. But thankfully he got out just fine. His boss is honestly kind of a dummy, is how we're going to word that, for really being upset. And I feel like that is a situation where cost-benefit analysis dictates it saves you more money to have 2 people on shift than 1 person on shift and anything stolen and or broken, right? But I mean, that's people who work in shops and warehouses, people who work security and law enforcement would be able to have input on this. And I welcome it. I like reading through some of these comments. Thank you, everyone. Thank you for watching. Really do appreciate it. Hopefully you enjoyed. I enjoyed it. So these are definitely situations where you can look at and try to get some hindsight, try to extract value from them, to try and, temper your expectations and responses. And thank you, Mr. Nightmare, for amazing content. I'll see you in the next one.